So you are welcome to the AIAZ webinar to present you our voluntary industry initiative on plastic packaging. This will be an introductory webinar to explain to you in detail the content of this initiative. My name is Francesca Angiuli, and I will be your host today for this webinar. I work at AIAZ as a sustainability manager. So before entering into the details of what we're gonna discuss today together, I would like to ask you to mute your microphones and to deactivate your videos. In this way, we will make sure that the quality of the audio will be good for everyone. And I also would like to stress that this webinar will be recorded. This means that the recordings of the session will be made available afterwards via our platform. So if you don't agree with the session being recorded, you are invited to leave the session now. Throughout the presentation, I invite you to already write me your questions, so do not wait until the last minute. We're going to have Q&A session at the end. So in order to test that you can use the function of the chat and also to make sure that you are hearing me and seeing the screen properly right now, can you please let me know via the chat whether you hear me well or not? Please just write yes in the chat if you write me correctly. So it's the small icon. And I would ask you, if you are joining right now, to mute yourself. Okay. Thank you for the confirmation. I see that already some of you responded that they can hear me properly. So I think that we can begin. So what we're gonna do today together is I will give you a short introduction about AIAZ, because I don't know if you're all very, very familiar faces, or if somebody maybe might be relatively new to the work we do. We're gonna present to you a short overview of our sustainability strategy, and then most of the time that we have today will be used to go into the details of the voluntary industry initiative on plastic packaging. So, sorry again, I'm trying to mute the people who joined afterwards. So AIAZ is the International Association for Soap, Detergents and Maintenance Products. So, sorry, we can hear the voices of some of you. And we are based in Brussels, and we have been the voice of the industry to the EU regulators for over 65 years. The membership to AIAZ consists of 29 national associations across Europe, and I can see already from the attendance list from today that many of you are certainly with the activity done by our national associations, because many of you are members at national level. We also have 18 corporate members and 8 value chain partners. Through this network, we represent over 900 companies supplying household national cleaning products across Europe. And of course, the industry is a substantial contributor to the European economy. So you can see on the slide that there is a market value that is of approximately 36 billion each year. And of course, this is a contribution also to jobs across Europe. AIAZ has a long history in leading voluntary industry initiatives, focusing on sustainable design, manufacturing, consumption, product safety, and safe use of products, both by consumer and professional customers. So, AIAZ can be described as a member-centric organization, and all the activities that we do are really built across the needs of the network across Europe, and in particular they are built around 3 main pillars of what we do. first of all, our activities around product stewardship and regulatory affairs. Then, of course, cleanliness and hygiene, and this is essential because, of course, while the products have to be safe, they also have to perform and to deliver the functions for which they are purchased. But of course, and this is what we are going to focus on today, we have a lot of activities in the area of sustainable development. As you can see, of course, these strategic priorities are very much interlinked between each other because one cannot exist without the other. But we will see now a little bit more into detail what we do in terms of work in the area of sustainability. So I will give the word to the head of the department, Sasha Nissen.
Thank you, Francesca. Very nice introduction. So as you can see from the slides, we at ASE are very much inspired by, let's say, the global and the EU framework when it comes to sustainable development. On one side, we have all the EU activities, which is very nicely summarized in the recently launched reflection paper from the European Commission on a Sustainable Europe 2030. But as you can see on the left-hand side, so it's quite a huge agenda that the European Commission is addressing via its sustainability activities. So here we talk, for example, about eco-design of products, talk about corporate social responsibility strategy, we talk about bioeconomy, but here today, since we are focusing on the packaging aspects, we look also into the EU circular economy policy and strategy, which was launched at the end of 2015, and embedded in that, the EU plastic strategy. That's the one side when it comes to the European dimension. On the other dimension, we need to look, of course, globally as well. And here, indeed, our industry sector is positively contributing to reach the United Nations Global Sustainable Development Goals. Here we have highlighted, as well as since relevant for our sustainability department, Goal 6, water and sanitation, Goal 12, particularly about responsible consumption and production, and number 13, climate action, which is very, very relevant and high on the agenda. Some of you might miss further SDGs, and indeed we are also overall, as an industry sector and as an industry association, are also, of course, looking especially into goal number 3, which is good health and well-being, which is actually at the heart of our industry, and also decent work and economic growth, number 8, so referring to corporate social responsibility aspects, and last but not least, number 17, the partnership for the goals. As you can see at the bottom of the slide, our strategy on sustainable development goes hand in hand in what companies are doing at corporate level, but also at brand level, targeting the 3 dimensions of sustainable development, looking into the environmental aspects, here the resources, for example, resource efficiency, into social aspects for the people, and of course, very, very relevant, since we are talking here about a relevant business in Europe, also the economic perspective. On the next slide, we have tried to summarize the overall ASE strategy on sustainable development, steering industry's progress through impactful projects. Indeed, the idea is really to launch impactful projects which are helpful for the industry and for companies to move towards sustainable development, starting with our umbrella initiative, the Charter for Sustainable Cleaning. And when I see the list of participants, there are indeed quite a number of Charter member companies joining this call today. So as you can see, we really try to bring everything under one umbrella here, under our strategy. Referring a bit to the Charter, which is indeed we can say, a successful industry initiative with more than 250 member companies on board since its launch in 2006, delivering also very good progress when it comes to environmental aspects. And of course, looking into the economic pillar of sustainable development that has directly also an impact on the economic benefits for companies. So, for example, when we talk about a reduction of 35% of energy consumed during the manufacturing process, or 14% less water use, of course, overall that has a very positive environmental impact, but that comes in parallel with savings for the companies. Linked to the reduced energy consumption, looking into the climate change goals, we can be very proud to say that since we have launched the Charter 12 years ago, we see a reduction of CO2 emitted by 36%, which is even beyond the targets as agreed on in Paris. Then more linked to, let's say, the topic which we are covering today, we see also a reduction of packaging material for consumer use by 25%. And last but not least, what we see is really increased use of the Charter Product Dimension logo. Starting in 2011, since then we our companies have sold more than 7 billion products with the Charter Product Dimension logo, and here I think that's demonstrating very good progress. Other aspects that we cover with our sustainable development strategy is regarding the compaction of products. Here just some highlights. So, for example, since the launch of the compaction initiative 20 years ago, we see a reduction of the total tonnage of detergents by 45%, which indeed means a saving of detergents of 30 million tons, 30 million tons, an astonishing figure. When it comes to the consumer level, dosage has been reduced by 50%, which is of course also a social benefit, but comes again with environmental savings, but also with monetary savings. Looking into the tips for saving water, energy, and money, which companies apply on their products. One highlight is, for example, the reduction of the wash temperature in Europe, which has moved from 49 degrees 20 years ago to 42.5 degrees. So here also, to some extent, also due to the help of tips provided to the consumers. I'm not now going into all the details of other initiatives, but here the idea was really to demonstrate how successful ASE initiatives in the context of sustainability have been, and we indeed will carry on to develop meaningful and impactful projects for the whole industry.
Thank you, Sasha. A very nice introduction to what we're going to discuss today, because indeed this is a quite important initiative. There is already quite some pressure in this regard, and that's also why I wanted, before going into describing the details of the initiative itself, to give a little bit the idea of the context where this initiative fits at European level. In fact, after the adoption in December 2015 of the EU Circular Economy Plan, the Commission also adopted in January 2018 a very wide European plastic strategy. And this strategy really has the objective to protect the environment from plastic pollution. And this is something I like to stress, because it's not against plastic as a whole, but against misuse or wrong disposal of plastic materials. And at the same time, the objective of this strategy is really to foster growth and innovation. In order to achieve that, which is quite a complex vision, the Commission set out with its partners and stakeholders some actions around 4 key areas. So first of all, improving economics and quality of recycling. Secondly, curbing plastic waste and littering. Then, of course, driving innovation and investing towards circular solutions, so basically giving incentive to industry to put in place innovative solutions. And, of course, the objective is to seek global actions, because all the players have to really do their part in order for having success and to achieve these objectives. In particular, in the first key action area, one of the points where it is really stressed that further work is needed is the design for recyclability. And in this context, well, numbers are quite interesting, because when we look at the data for 2015 related to the European plastic demand and the European plastic waste generation, you will see that packaging has really an impressive role in these overall pictures. And that's the reason why this is quite key area of work as well for our sector. In our sector, yes, we do use packaging, because detergents are always sold in some sort of packaging. But this is done for a reason, because packaging, of course, avoids product leakage, ensures the safe use of the products. It also serves the purpose to protect products during transport, and is also useful to have a correct dosage of the product itself. And of course, it is essential that packaging is correctly collected and disposed of to ensure that it is properly recycled and that there are no adverse environmental impacts related to the use of packaging. And this is true for all types of packaging materials. So paper-based, like for instance folding cartons for dishwashing tablets, rigid plastics for bottles, flexible plastics, metals that are used for air care aerosol cans. But the discussion around the circular economy and the plastics strategy later on have really increased the attention on the plastic packagings across this diverse group of materials. And that's the reason why, as the IAZ, we have been working, and we will present now an initiative that focuses on that types of material. We have opened for signature on the 1st of January this voluntary initiative, and really the objective is to take on board the challenge of increasing the uptake of recycled content in plastic packaging. So we really are working in parallel to all the other activities done by our stakeholders, and like Sasha mentioned before, by the brands, by the labels that are placing products on the market in Europe. And the reason why, well, first of all, the objective is really to steer the industry towards continuous improvement, but also at the same time to show what the companies have already been doing by managing to get measures, numbers of what are the achievements so far. And of course, identify what are the challenges where we still need to work, and we can do that together. This initiative is purely voluntary, so for me that's very important to stress. No member of AIAZ or its national associations is by default part of this initiative, so it's up to each company to decide whether to subscribe or not. And it is open to all companies, members of AIAZ, members of its national associations, but also outside this network. Of course, companies that are manufacturing and or placing on the market detergents, cleaning and maintenance products. And as you can see, the geographical scope is really the EU market, Iceland, Liechtenstein, Norway, the UK, that will continue to be a close ally no matter what for all the activities related to the work that we do, and Switzerland. And when we talk about the scope of these products, we are considering not only the primary packaging of the products, but also secondary and tertiary packaging of household cleaning and maintenance products. Just to be really clear that the outreach of the initiative really tries to be global and to really address the challenge that we have in front of us. Products are covered if they are manufactured and placed on the market within the area that we indicated before, but also if they are manufactured and not placed on the market in this EU plus friends identified area, and if they are manufactured outside the geographical scope but placed on the market within the scope that we have highlighted before. And it is open to both branded products and private labels. So really the people that can be interested in these initiatives are those that we would identify as manufacturers, but also distributors or importers. The project has been launched on the 1st of January this year, and it's up and running until the end of June 2026. And there's no deadline for companies to comply to it. I'm happy to say that we have already received some signatures, but again, we will welcome any contribution to support these goals until the continuation of the project. And now let's see a little bit more into details. What does it mean for a company to support this initiative? So the company is signing up for the commitment will commit, sorry for the repetition, to quantitative targets, first of all, then to annual reporting of progress to AISE, and to further engagement with consumers. So when we look into the quantitative targets, we expect that by 2025, committed companies will have a minimum of 20% uptake recycled material in plastic packaging. And this 20% has to be considered as an average across the different product categories. So we define in this case recycled material as material that can come from post-consumer waste that is collected therefore via different official collection schemes, but also material from outside that is outside existing collection streams, like for instance from beach cleanups and this type of operations. Also, post-industrial recycled material is covered by this initiative. And it is really important to stress that indeed this is an average value across the portfolio, meaning that for some product categories it will be possible to achieve even higher percentages, while in other cases the value might be lower. But it is important that it is considered as an overall and across the products that you place on the market. The second quantitative target, always targeting 2025, is the intention to have all plastic packaging recyclable or reusable or compostable. I have included in the slide the definitions that we have considered for these three different criteria, and these definitions are the same ones that you will find in the Ellen MacArthur Foundation Global Commitment. Please be aware that in this commitment that we have used as the basis for this definition, the three bullet points that I have included here in the slide are accompanied by some explanatory notes that will give you the reference to some standards or they will provide some examples of what can be considered covered or not. What is important is that a packaging or a packaging component is considered recyclable when successful post-consumer collection, sorting, and recycling is proven to work in practice and at scale. This means in the place where the product has been placed on the market. Then we have reusable packaging. That is one which has been designed to accomplish or prove its ability to accomplish a minimum number of trips or rotation in a system for reuse. And compostable packaging that is compostable in compliance with relevant international compostability standards. And again, when compostability has been proven to work in practice and at scale. So, as I said, in case there are questions on this point, please feel free to start writing them in the chat. I have not reported here all the notes from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation because that's quite extensive, but these documents are publicly available as well. Then in support to these quantitative targets, there are also some additional aids that will help us to achieve the overall objective that is behind this initiative development. And one in particular which is applicable especially to the companies that are members of the IAZ Charter for Sustainable Cleaning, because this second target that I have just explained will be applicable as of 2021. So all the packaging has to be recyclable, reusable, or compostable in order to meet the requirements for the advanced sustainability profiles with the intention to cover the whole AIAZ portfolio. So, of course, this is not something that is already in place for the Charter members. Each individual product category will have to be revised and amended accordingly, but this was really the chance to leverage the already very good work that the Charter members are doing in terms of really improving the sustainability profile of their products. And secondly, another important point is that the experts of the IAZ groups are developing some guiding principles on sustainable packaging design with a focus on recyclability. And the idea is really to make these principles available before summer. And these principles should help companies to have a critical look at the way they can really improve the process at the design stage. So how to avoid issues in the recyclability since the very beginning. Like I said before, committed companies will also have to annually report about their progress to AIAC so that we can collect all the figures and have an idea of how the sector is doing. What companies will be asked to provide in terms of information will be the volume of packaging material and the fraction of this packaging that is made of plastic material, together with the fraction that is composed of recycled plastic. This will be particularly useful because it will allow us to judge, for instance, in those cases where we see a decrease in the volume of plastic packaging material, whether this is really due to a design improvement or maybe to a shift towards different material in case the volume of the overall packaging remains the same or even increases. And as a last reporting point, companies will have to let us know the volume of recyclable or reusable or compostable plastic packaging. In the case of private label products that are, of course, covered by the scope of this initiative, the report might be done by the manufacturer. And this information will be used at the end of the project to prepare a closeout report. But really, even in the course of the project itself, it will be very useful in order to have an idea of how the sector is performing and where are the areas where support is needed. Now, a note, just to clarify, that signatures are not required to be a Charter member to be supporting this initiative, but we will ensure that the reporting can be done via the Charter tool because this tool has proven to be quite user-friendly and practical to use. As I said in the beginning, another point for work when committing to this initiative is engagement with consumers. So signatories will further engage to provide information either on products or online, or even both, on the correct way to handle the plastic packaging. And you will not find a detailed explanation in the project description on how to do that. Because really the practical way in which this can be implemented is left to each individual company, because the requirements can be very, very specific depending on the product type or on the geographical area where the collection and the sorting takes place. But of course, at the IAZ, we will be happy to consider any request for support or clarification that will come from the network, where we can, let's say, discuss with either the companies and our national associations what can be done and where we can streamline our actions. So what will AISE do in the context of this initiative? We will facilitate and encourage the companies to sign up. And this is something that will definitely require the help of our national partners for promoting the initiative at local level. We will consolidate the sector information to monitor and report on progress, and this will be based on the annual data reporting that we have described before. We will, of course, monitor and inform the stakeholders on what are the targets and objectives that have been achieved, and where are the barriers that maybe prevent from the full implementation of the intentions behind this commitment. And we will consider developing any additional guidance where we will receive information from the signatories that there are areas of ambiguity or unclarity. Of course, in every case, each company will have to decide how to manage these tasks internally. So, like for the bullet before, you will not find specific instructions on which processes to set up internally to achieve the objectives that are part of this initiative. But we will only be collecting the information on a yearly basis. And last but not least, because it's quite important as well, from your side, no registration fee is to be paid for being part of the group of supporting companies to this initiative. So the IAZ will support the initiative via its internal resources, but of course each company will have to make sure that internal resources are available to provide the data annually and to monitor the progress and to be deliver on the targets that are part of the commitment. So, what does it mean in practice? Well, the reason why we are also working on this very important point is because many companies have already made a lot of public commitments, either towards 2025 or 2030, and there are already many products on the market or ongoing initiatives that are completely in line with the vision behind this initiative. So you might find already declaration by companies that by 2025, 100% of their packaging will be recyclable, reusable, or compostable. There are already products on the market claiming that they use either 35, 50, or even 100% recycled content. And there are already initiatives where companies have set out engagements with the municipalities, for instance, to install sorting points at local level, or they have engaged with schools to provide formative activities, and all of this contributes really to the achievement of the targets for the sector as a whole. So this really depends on the type of activities that a company has the possibility to roll out, the type of network that is available around you. So this is really left for you to decide, especially in particular for the engagement with different networks in your local areas. Of course, the feasibility and the success for the implementation of the different actions that are needed to succeed is subject to different conditions that have to be have to exist at market levels. And here I'm talking about conditions that should exist for the industry as a whole, so they are not specific to the detergent sectors. First of all, there are some technical market requirements, and in particular, I'm referring to the availability of sufficient quantities of secondary raw materials and secondary raw materials that are of a sufficient quality to ensure that you can have a satisfactory quality of the packaging, you can ensure the safety of your products, and that the packaging can deliver all the positive functions that is supposed to do. And of course, in order to allow industry to deliver, because the detergent sector is not the only sector that is at the moment committed on achieving those targets, it's important that there is availability of these secondary raw materials for all the market players, so that there are no unfair competitions on prices or shortages that do not allow to ensure constant level of the production. Then there are other elements that are elements related to the overall policy framework where the industry has to operate. And there, of course, we are aware that there is the need for better harmonization in the collection system across the different member states, and that in some cases there are issues with the friendliness for innovation of the different policy options. And of course, the limitations for trade can be a barrier when there are cross-border shipments in the achievement of those targets. And indeed, when we talk about recycling, of course, the APR fees and the different bonuses linked to recyclability and the use of recycled material are another area where further work is needed. Of course, we're not talking about work that you can do alone at company level, but that's really where the sector as a whole, where joining forces through the association as well, can really help in the overall framework for delivering the results that are expected. In the area as well of consumer engagement, we are aware that there is the need for further education for consumers in order to collect and sort correctly. And again, this is not necessarily something that can be done by each company on its own, as well as the harmonization of recycling labeling on the different packs. But that's where the whole value chain engagement really becomes helpful. And as AISD, we have already been cooperating with a lot of our stakeholders to really deliver holistic and consistent framework for the industry. And we do that by being active in different platforms. We do that, for instance, in our case, by participating in ad hoc workshops with value chain partners, where we exchange expertise, where we raise what are the issues for our members, because in some cases there is a difficulty for the people that are in charge of smoothing the policy framework. There is a difficulty to know what the issues are. And we have been discussing with other authoritative partners like the Ellen MacArthur Foundations, like the European Circular Plastic Alliance, and many others. And that's where everybody then should take a look at what are their stakeholders, who are the people they are supposed to engage with, because like we said before, like also Sasha mentioned in introduction, really this can only be achieved when there is a strong partnership for the goals. Now, before concluding my part of the presentation and give you the time for asking some questions, what should you do if you are interested to support this initiative? Well, the first step is really to go on the IAZ website and download the project description as well as the letter of commitment, because I have tried to summarize at my best with these slides what is really the content, but there are more explanation and clarifications that are available in those documents. And secondly, you should really have a look at this document within your company, with your colleagues, to make sure that the vision of this initiative is in line with your company objectives, to make sure that you are able to implement the targets as set out, and that your colleagues, be it in product development, marketing, or legal teams, can support the initiative and the internal process that is needed really to deliver and to report on the progresses. Then you should certainly inform your national associations on your intentions, because this is really a precious resource that we have here within AIAZ, because national associations are really a hub of national knowledge, expertise, and definitely the key for the network at local level. After that, feel free to, of course, contact us if you have any question for clarification, where there is still something that is not clear. Or, of course, if you feel already confident that you can deliver and you want to support the project, there is the final step, which is the signature of the letter of commitment that should be sent to AIAZ. So I have now finished the part of the presentation. I've given the information that I thought you would be curious to know. Now it's your time to ask questions. There will be certainly some time after the webinar if you want to contact us via email, but you have the chat function that is available, so I would ask you to type any questions should you have. So now I will close the audio for 1 minute and collect the questions that I will receive, and then we will open it again so that we can provide you with some answers. Okay, so I am back. I have already received a few questions, so I will start by answering those. So a first question was request of the status for I&I products. So we are referring to industrial applications. Well, those are not covered by the initiative as it stands right now. And the reason is that when we were discussing this internally, we realized that the targets and probably the types of requirements that we should set out would have been quite different between household and industrial. So we started from the category that, let's say, is at the moment more under pressure and where we see that a little bit more guidance and support is needed. But it's in the interest of the associations really to consider whether any activity is needed for the industrial application. So if you, for instance, would consider that that's something that could be of interest for you, what you should do is either to ask your national association to raise the concern or the request to discuss it within AISE. And that's what we will do, because we know that there is definitely some interest in that regard. Then another question is related to the targets. So somebody asked me whether the targets are set by company or by brand, because some companies might have several brands. Well, the targets are set per company, but they are set only for the brands that are covered by the AISE portfolio. So, for instance, for those companies that have other businesses, be it cosmetic, be it food, those branches or those brands will not be covered by the initiative related only to detergents and maintenance product sector. And again, we are trying to be interactive and really to be, let's say, informative today. So in case the answers that I'm giving do not fully respond to the questions that you have, please feel free to write that to me via email or via the chat. So I also have another question related to the 20% target. So how difficult is it to reach the 20% targets of recycled material, and how did you calculate that is the right level to achieve? Well, it was not really a calculation in this case. We have developed this initiative and all its content thanks to the input from a group of AISE experts. So people working for some of our member companies that are really technical experts on packaging. We have also run a stakeholder consultation before making this initiative public to check, for instance, with the plastic recyclers, what could be the level that they could foresee as a feasible target. And the 20% is really defined as a minimum objective, because we would be really happy if all the companies could achieve higher ambitious targets, but at the same time, we really want to be the initiative to be accessible also to the smaller player. And we have more than 60% of the companies that are SMEs in this business, and that's the reason why we have tried to set an objective that could be ambitious, but at the same time could be implementable also by smaller players, so that nobody would be excluded from the possible support to the initiative. Okay, so I got confirmation that the answers to the questions so far were clear. So I will give you still a little bit of time if you wish to write something else via the chat. Also be aware that the slides as well as the recordings will be made available. This means that you will be able to share them also with the colleagues that were not able to attend today's session. And please don't hesitate to reach out, because really we hope that many of you after today will at least consider signing or consider advertising the initiative internally. So another question is whether the percentage of recycled content will be different for HDPE than for PET packages. Well, the quick and dirty answer is no, in the sense that the percentage is set intentionally as an overall average percentage on the volumes, meaning that you might achieve much bigger percentages, for instance, for one type of polymeric material than for another, and that could be due to limitations that you have internally or really limitation in the availability of the different materials. When we were considering whether to differentiate between different materials, we realized that this would have been really, really difficult for companies to make a commitment at this stage on different polymer types, because it's not possible to have a clear picture of how the market will be in this regard in 5 years' time or 2 years' time, so that it would be easier to have a generic objective and then to wait and make an average between the volumes among the different materials used for the packaging. Okay, then, I see there is a lot of interesting questions. So, well, what happens if a company is not able to meet the targets? Well, of course, that's unfortunate, because really the idea when someone signs up for the initiative is to do the best possible to achieve those objectives, but really the point is to identify the root cause of why these targets have not been achieved. So we will not make a final assessment only after 5 years in 2025. That's exactly the reason why we have decided to have a yearly data reporting, because in the context of the yearly reporting, you will be able to tell us, for instance, whether you are already able to meet the targets or if you are well below, for instance, and in that case, why. So if it is something that is really dependent on a local situation, or if it is something that depends on the availability of materials and so on, and in this way we will be able to assess whether we can somehow intervene, whether there is something that can be done by the association, like developing guidance, like acting at local level via the network of the national associations in interaction with authorities and so on. So we will not publish the name of companies that cannot achieve the targets on the website for blaming of the for this situation. It really depends on the reason why this is the case. Like we said, there are a lot of barriers that are not really dependent on the single companies, and these are the ones that we have highlighted in the slides, but that are also part of the project description that you will find online. And we are working with the European Commission, with the collecting schemes here at European level to try to create a framework that will allow meeting those targets. And the same applies for the other questions I've received on flexible packaging that aren't considered recyclable. Well, the reason why they aren't considered recyclable is most likely because the technologies at the moment in the areas where they are placed on the market are not available. So there, we will not enter as the IAC in the discussion of on the let's say, different types of packaging. We are not recommending to shift from one packaging to the other. Certainly what should be done is a work together with your local recyclers to make sure that there are the technologies to improve the situation in the time frame that is the one for the initiative, so 2025. Like we said before, AISE will not act as the police of this initiative, so the company signing up for the project will be responsible and will also be, in charge of its own reputational aspects in maintaining the commitments that have been made in this regard. Okay. Yeah, so what is the level of proof or sufficient proof to certify that 20% of the total volume of the packaging is recycled? Okay, so, well, also in this case, each company signing up for the initiative is in charge of the things that they can control directly. So at the moment where you have done everything that is in your capacity to make sure that you meet the target for the initiative, like in this example that you have provided, be it getting the declaration from your supplier that this threshold of 20% is met, that is definitely sufficient. So you have done your job. So I think this would be part also of the, let's say, responsibility of those who are signing up. What will be done is some random checks in the context of the KPI reporting for the Charter for Sustainable Cleaning, because of course in the moment where you are also members of the Charter, you will be subject to verifications on how you ensure that you make substantiated declaration about the criteria for the products that you are placing on the market, and these definitely fall in that category. Okay, so I see that the clarifications for now were sufficient. You have picked very interesting questions. Thank you very much. Like I said, again, the objective is really to have an informative session. So the questions that you will ask us will also help us to continue managing this project from our side and to try to clarify the points that might be ambiguous or where maybe we did not think about some specific situations that you could raise via your question. So those are very welcome. Okay, so I'm not getting any more questions from the people on the line. So I think that we can close the session for today. I thank all of you who took part to the webinar for attending and also for the valuable input. I have included in the presentation the link to our general AISE website and our packaging initiative page, and that's where you will find the slides published. So thank you very much for today, and we will talk to you soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.